I still remember how she walked into our home that morning. Her presence lit up the room like sunshine breaking through a cloudy day. She looked stunning, her hair casually messy, her smile wide and carefree, as if she had just returned from a luxurious getaway. The soft thud of her bag landing on the entryway table was followed by her laughter, a sound that used to lift my spirits, but now felt like the cruelest reminder of what was lost. I held my coffee mug tightly, pretending to scroll through my phone, though my chest felt weighed down by an unbearable heaviness. "Morning, Liam," she said cheerfully, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Her lips were soft and familiar, but the gesture felt hollow, like a routine she no longer believed in. My stomach churned as I forced myself to respond. "Morning, Ava," I replied, managing a smile that never quite touched my eyes. My knuckles turned white around the mug as I resisted the urge to spill everything I knew. The confrontation would come, but not now, not like this. I wanted her to face the truth with no escape, no room for denial. My name is Liam, and for 8 years, I was married to Ava. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect couple. We had steady jobs, a beautiful home in Willow Heights, and a love story straight out of a romance novel. Ava was my everything, my college sweetheart, the one who laughed at my awkward jokes and cried with joy when I proposed to her at sunset. Together, we built a life that felt solid, unbreakable. Or so I thought. About a month ago, small cracks began to appear. At first, they were easy to dismiss. Late nights at work, her growing attachment to her phone, and a distance I couldn't quite put into words. I chalked it up to stress. Her job as a designer at Nova Vision, a fast-paced tech company, often came with heavy demands. But then the excuses started piling up. Business dinners that didn't add up, a last-minute trip with friends that seemed hastily planned. I noticed how she would angle her phone away when a notification popped up. At first, it was just a gut feeling, that sinking instinct you try to ignore because the alternative is too painful to accept. But suspicions have a way of taking over, growing like weeds until they choke every moment of peace. One evening, when Ava was working late, I gave in to the doubts. I opened her laptop, hating myself for even considering such a breach of trust. And there it was, an email thread she hadn't closed. A name appeared far too often, Ryan. Ryan was her coworker, someone I had met briefly at one of her company events. I remembered shaking his hand, clueless about the role he was playing in dismantling my marriage from within. The evidence kept building. A hotel reservation under both their names, text messages that left no room for misinterpretation. Still, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if I was jumping to conclusions? Then I found the final proof. It was a photo on her phone, hidden among hundreds of others. It showed them at a rooftop bar, her head resting on his shoulder as if it belonged there. That night, while she was out for one of her so-called work dinners, I set up a discreet camera in our living room. I hated myself for it, but I needed clarity. The footage captured everything. Her laughter, their closeness, the way they stumbled into the space we once called ours, oblivious to the sanctity they were destroying. I edited the footage into a short, undeniable montage and labeled the folder Ava's Choices. The next morning, I connected the file to our living room TV. Ava came home as cheerful as ever, tossing her jacket onto the couch and greeting me with the same practiced warmth. I played along, keeping my heartbreak bottled up. As she settled on the sofa, scrolling absent-mindedly on her phone, I pressed play. It started softly, her laughter mingling with the hum of a crowded room. Her attention snapped to the screen, and I watched the color drain from her face. As Ava watched the screen, her image appeared, seated too close to Ryan, her hand lingering on his. The video shifted to them entering our living room, their bodies entwined like strangers to decency. What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling as her phone slipped from her hands. I stood behind her, arms crossed, my face calm, though every nerve in my body screamed. "You tell me, Ava. I said, my tone firm and unyielding. She scrambled for the remote, but I was faster. I snatched it before she could stop the playback. No, I said sharply, my voice leaving no room for argument. You wanted to hide this from me. Now watch. Watch what you've done. Tears welled in her eyes as the damning footage continued. Each second felt like a hammer blow, driving the betrayal deeper into the open wound of our marriage. Liam, please, she began, her voice cracking under the weight of her guilt. This isn't... Don't insult me with excuses, I interrupted, my voice steady but as cold as ice. Her tears flowed freely now, carving paths down her cheeks as she pleaded for understanding, for forgiveness. But the image of her and Ryan laughing together, as if the life we built was nothing more than a passing memory, was burned into my mind. I'm sorry, she sobbed. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I love you, Liam. Her words landed like a bitter joke, and I laughed, a cold, unfamiliar sound that surprised even me. A mistake? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You call this a mistake? Bringing him here, into our home, into the life we built together? She reached for me, desperation in her every move, but I stepped back, raising my hands to ward her off. Don't touch me, I said, my voice calm but laced with venom. From the shelf beside me, I grabbed a folder and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. What's this? She asked, her hand shaking as she opened it. Your future, I replied coldly. Inside were the divorce papers, signed and ready to file. You don't get to destroy everything and walk away unscathed, Ava. Actions have consequences. Her sobs turned into frantic protest as she flipped through the pages, her voice rising with desperation. Please, Liam, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do anything. As I drove away, my grip on the steering wheel tightened. Emotions I had kept buried, anger, betrayal, sadness, rushed to the surface. How could she do this? After everything we'd built, after every promise we'd made? But amidst the storm of emotions, there was a quiet sense of relief. A voice in the back of my mind whispered that I had done the right thing, that this was the start of something new, even if it didn't feel that way just yet. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and legal meetings. Ava tried everything to stall the process. She called me incessantly, leaving tearful voicemails about how sorry she was, how she'd made a mistake, how she couldn't imagine life without me. I shook my head, the finality of the moment settling into the room like a thick fog. You already made your choice, Ava. Now I'm making mine. I turned to leave, her cries echoing in the room. I didn't look back. Each step toward the door lifted the weight I had carried for weeks. Outside, the crisp air filled my lungs, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. I didn't waste time after that. My suitcase was already packed and waiting by the door. The previous night, I had carefully gathered everything I needed. My books, my clothes, the framed photo of my parents Ava had never liked. Everything else I left behind, let it haunt her. But her words only deepened the wound. If she couldn't imagine life without me, why had she chosen someone else? Why had she risked everything for meaningless moments with him? Her desperation grew. One day, she showed up unannounced at my temporary apartment, a modest one-bedroom I'd rented downtown. She stood in the hallway, her eyes red and swollen, holding a box of what I assumed were memories she hoped would sway me, old photos, handwritten notes, trinkets from our years together. Liam, please, she said, her voice breaking. She began speaking, her voice trembling. I'm begging you, Liam, don't throw this away. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. You threw it away, Ava, the moment you let him into our lives. It wasn't like that, she pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. I was lost, confused. It didn't mean anything. You have to believe me. I don't have to believe anything, I replied, my tone cold but steady. And you don't get to rewrite the story now. You made your choices. I'm just living with the consequences. She stared at me, her bottom lip trembling, before placing the box at my feet. "Please, just look through this. Remember what we had. We can fix it. I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't answer. Instead, I closed the door. The sound echoed through the hallway, like the final nail in a coffin. The box remained there for days. Eventually, I carried it to the building's garbage chute and let it fall into oblivion. In the weeks that followed, the world around us reacted in waves. Friends reached out, some shocked, others offering support. A few admitted they had suspected something was off with Ava, but hadn't wanted to interfere. Mutual friends divided like the Red Sea. Some sided with her, believing her tearful version of events about making a mistake. Others stood firmly by me, disgusted by her betrayal. As for Ryan, I heard through the grapevine that their so-called relationship crumbled within months. Whatever spark they had fizzled out when the thrill of secrecy gave way to harsh reality. He had a history, it turned out, of chasing after married women, relishing the thrill but never committing when things got serious. I felt a grim satisfaction when I learned Ava had moved out of her apartment and back into her parents' house in Crestview, starting over in the shadow of her choices. For me, starting over meant something entirely different. I threw myself into my work, rediscovered old hobbies, and spent time with friends who reminded me what it felt like to laugh without a weight pressing on my chest. I began therapy, not just to process Ava's betrayal, but to unpack how I had ignored my own needs in the relationship. Always prioritizing her happiness over mine, months turned into a year, and slowly the anger subsided. It didn't disappear completely. Deep wounds rarely do, but it no longer defined me. I found a new apartment, one with large windows that flooded the space with light. I filled it with plants and art that made it feel alive. I started running in the mornings, each step pounding out the remnants of my grief until all that remained was clarity. People often asked if I regretted how I handled things, if I wished I'd been less cold, more forgiving, more understanding. The truth was I didn't. Ava's betrayal wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a series of calculated choices that disregarded the life we had built together. Forgiveness might come one day, but reconciliation never would, and I was okay with that. The last time I saw Ava was at a mutual friend's wedding. She approached me hesitantly, her once confident demeanor replaced by something quieter, almost timid. She congratulated me on how well I seemed to be doing, her eyes scanning my face as if searching for the man she once knew. I smiled politely, thanked her, and walked away, leaving her standing among a sea of people who no longer knew her as my wife that I had won, not in the way she might have imagined. It wasn't about the divorce settlement, though the prenuptial agreement ensured she walked away with little. It wasn't about proving a point or making her suffer. My victory was in reclaiming myself, in building a life that was full, authentic, and free from the shadows of her betrayal. That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker against the horizon, a profound sense of peace settled over me. Life has a way of breaking you, but it also has a way of remaking you, if you let it. In that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be,